Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new franchise ranking here in Max Movies. And today I'm going to rank all 11 Spider-Man slash Venom films, including Spider-Man No Way Home. Before we start with this ranking, guys, please subscribe, ring the bell if you're new to the channel. I do movie reviews, TV show reviews, streaming platform reviews, movie rankings like these, and a box office breakdown show on Monday. So please subscribe, ring the bell. We just got over 100 subscribers. Also, comment down below. Let me know your ranking. If you just want to do Spider-Man films and leave the two Venoms out, if you want to include two Venoms, please let me know in the comment section down below. Let me see your ranking. I know it's very personal to a lot of people, including myself. So I can't wait to talk about this list. And please like the video, the thumbs up button. So I will be talking about spoilers for all of the movies. Now, this does include No Way Home. So if you do not want to see, I've already done a non-spoiler review and a spoiler review of Spider-Man No Way Home. So I will talk, I'm not going to obviously break down the movie like I did yesterday, but I will talk about some of the best parts about what I love about Spider-Man No Way Home. It could include, I think it will be mild spoilers. I'll say mild spoilers for Spider-Man No Way Home. Well, actually, I'll just say, because I'm talking about spoilers for all the movies. If you've not seen any of the Spider-Man movies or Venom movies, I'll be talking about them on this ranking. It's a very personal ranking. Spider-Man is my favorite superhero of all time. So I grew up with the character. The first movie came out when I was born. So I've really grown up with this entire franchise. Can't wait to talk about this with you right now. So we're going to go from 11 to 1. Again, spoiler warning. Here we go. So starting off with number 11 is The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is really, for me, the only Spider-Man movie that I just have a hard time watching for the most part. It's a movie that does have some really great moments. The chemistry between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone are off the charts in this film. The actual suit is a major upgrade over the last film. The Spider-Man even theme is an upgrade over the theme from the first film. And there's a couple good moments where, Spider-Man works with the young kid with the wind turbine. Aunt May has one of the best Aunt May scenes in the entire franchise with, that's my boy scene. So there's a couple really good moments in the film, but it's really caked in a studio infringement, studio trying to put everything in the movie at one time. And also it feels like a setup to a Sinister Six movie. All the villains are just off right from the start. Rhino, played by Paul Giamatti, is easily the worst villain in the entire Spider-Man franchise. Just really over the top and just doesn't fit the movie. But we need Peter Parker to tell a joke to him. And so once he tells that joke, Rhino runs over a bunch of police cops. So it just isn't, the tones also just don't work. Max Dillon, Jamie Foxx's Electro, is just another version of Syndrome from The Incredibles, and the Riddler from Batman Forever, and Aldrich Killian from Iron Man 3, just a person who's obsessed with the hero and wants to become a villain because of it. It's just, there isn't enough. The fact that they had the CGI doesn't look that great. The score for his character is really rough. The fact that they have his score itself is fine, but they have this voiceover with trying to symbolize the voices in his head that always just pulls me out of the movie. And then Dane DeHaan for me is a mixture of two. The stuff with Harry and Peter together, the one scene where Harry and Peter, walk around with the rock scene, that's a really nice scene between the two of them. But there's just no explanation why Harry's just dying now. It took Norman 60 years, and now it's just Harry's dying right now, and he needs Spider-Man's blood. And why this movie for me is by far the worst, that I think it ruins what truly makes Spider-Man great, is that anyone can be Spider-Man. And this film explains, with the help of Peter's parents, is that Peter's father's DNA is in the radioactive spider. So only someone genetically related to him can be Spider-Man. And that is not the point of Spider-Man. They basically made it clear that Peter would be the only person who would have these powers if he got bit by the spider. So for me, that basically kills the entire identity of who the character is, because the reason why I love Spider-Man, and a lot of people do, is that anyone can wear the mask. And this movie does not go with that, and goes with the parent stuff, which also is just not very good. It's just a train wreck movie for me. There's some good moments, but for the most part, a really bad movie with 2.5 hours long. Great Gwen, Gwen is just Emma Stone. Her character, again, doesn't really do much. I just wish the Gwen death hit harder for me. I think it does from an Andrew Garfield point of view, but Gwen herself makes a lot of dumb character decisions in these two films. And it comes to a pretty emotional death in the third. So I really don't like this movie. I know a lot of people who defend this film or don't. I'm on a very, very, very negative side. And let's move to number 10, and that is The Amazing Spider-Man. So as you can tell, Andrew Garfield films are the bottom two for me. Now, I still love, again, I'm a huge Andrew Garfield fan. Believe he's the best performance of the entire year in Tick, Tick, Boom. So not his fault, but this for me is just a watchable bad film, in my opinion. I really do not like The Amazing Spider-Man 1. It's definitely has some, again, really solid, I think better moments than Amazing Spider-Man 2, when you're talking about Dennis Leary as Gwen's father adding into the mix, and having someone Peter knows kind of go against him, the philosophy of Spider-Man. When he takes off his mask to the kid in the fire, that's a really, really good scene. And again, the Peter and Gwen stuff obviously works in the film because the chemistry, the improvisation between Garfield and Stone is just like the second one, very much on point in this film. But the film, and again, the film was really dragged down by a really weak villain who had most of his really good scenes cut. If you watch the deleted scenes of this movie, the Lizard has a son. He has way more background on, you get who he is. In this movie, he's just a scientist who wants to regrow his arm. And then once he does, he becomes a lizard and wants everyone to become lizard people. The actual plot line, when you actually think about what Lizard wants to do in the third act of this movie, makes absolutely no sense. And because the third act, he literally just comes out and wants to destroy everyone to be lizard people. It just doesn't make for an intriguing plot for a Spider-Man film. The suit is really not good. This is definitely my least favorite Spider-Man suit to date. Reason why they changed that in the second film. But I just never have a good time with the Amazing Spider-Man. I feel like it's trying not to be very similar to Tobey Maguire's, but it's also trying to be very similar to it. They do the Uncle Ben thing again, but they have Martin Sheen try not to say with great power comes great responsibility for some reason in the film, which is a really funny scene, which is not supposed to be funny, it's supposed to be very serious. Uncle Ben's death doesn't hit as hard. And there's a whole subplot in the movie where after Uncle Ben dies, Peter's chasing in a montage scene, trying to find his killer. And then that subplot is completely forgotten about for the rest of the film. I mean, there's so many plot lines in both Amazing Spider-Man and 2 that are in the movies for like 10 or 15 minutes and then are completely forgotten about as the movie goes on. So again, very similar to the second one. There's a little bit, once again, too much going on, but I did love the emotional punch of Dennis Leary's death in this film, and his relationship with Peter, how that relates to Gwen. But again, the ending also suffers because once, Captain Stacy tells Peter, stay away from Gwen, we end the movie with Peter going back to Gwen. So it doesn't really hit as home as it should be. Coming in number 9 is Spider-Man 3. Now, yes, this is not my least favorite film. I do like it over both Andrew films. Now, obviously, I grew up with the Tobey films. This obviously has a bit more nostalgia for me than The Amazing Spider-Man, but I rewatched a lot of these films all the time. I'm just a big Spider-Man fan, so I see these films a billion times. Spider-Man 3 has some really great moments in it. It really is half good and half really bad. A tale of two halves, as you can see, the black and the red suited Spider-Man. Some of the good is I think the first act does an okay job for the most part setting up the entire film. Sandman's a really intriguing villain. Thomas Hayden Church does a great job. The fact that he's in prison, but he wants to see his daughter who's going through some things, health-wise, wants to take care of his family, but also is, of course, trapped being Sandman. It's a really beautiful sequence when Sandman becomes Sandman. And I think that obviously my biggest issue with this movie really is that Harry should have been the main villain of the movie. They do a great job in the first two Tobey Maguire films setting up that Harry Osborn should be the main focus because he's pissed off that Peter is Spider-Man and that Peter, in his opinion, Spider-Man is the one who killed his father. But they have so much going on. We have Venom in the movie. Eddie Brock, Topher Grace is totally miscast in the movie. But there's some really good moments. As I said, the fight on the subway, down the subway between black suited Spider-Man and Sandman's a really, really good fight. The Spider-Man and Sandman fight as well, just on after the Spider-Man celebration scene is really good. But it just feels like it's reused plots from the first two films where once again, we're kind of off and on with Peter and MJ after finally coming together at the end of 2. Harry has to, because they want to do Sandman and Venom, Harry has to have, pneumonia or whatever it is, pneumonia, after fighting Spider-Man in the opening scene. that he lost his memory for 75% of the film, which is a real slap in the face to what that character has been built up to in the first two films. So this film is a bit of a misfire because it really had great setup for this to be a great movie. And again, the swing for me is really great. Tobey Maguire is really good in the role. Again, obviously, it's a little bit, the dancing stuff is really, really ridiculous, but still, there's some good moments, but I still think it's, again, these bottom three are clearly, for me, the bottom three of the Spider-Man franchise. Let's go to number 8 with the first Venom film in 2018. This, for me, is a fun mess. It's an absolute train wreck if you think about it from a plot point of view, but I still, for some reason, have fun with the Venom film. I give it a 2.5 out of 5, and I really stand by that. I have fun enough to make this a watchable movie, but when you actually dissect the movie, it could easily be one of the worst Spider-Man films, related films ever. Tom Hardy is much better than, obviously, Topher Grace. Perfect casting, really, for Tom Hardy, being both Eddie Brock and Venom, and the back and forth between Eddie and Venom. Even though it's more in the second film, it does get its chance to shine in this film. The Venom suit is really, really fun. There's some really funny comedy that's kind of a throwback to early 2000s films. But overall, as I said, it is a mess. Riz Ahmed plays a thankless villain who just turns out to be a dumb third act Venom-like character playing Riot towards the third act. Michelle Williams is a very one-note love interest to Tom Hardy. And the biggest problem with this film is just the lighting, really, because all of Venom's action scenes are at night. And when you're a black suited character, it's tough to see what's going on when Venom's fighting Riot in the third act. Like, I struggle to see what is going on. And I've seen the film 5 or 6 times. I still can't figure out all the little details that happen in that fight. So it's a really fun trend. There's some really funny and fun moments in the film, but when you actually think about the plot, at times it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Let's move into some good films, with number 7 being Venom, Let There Be Carnage, the second Venom film, which came out in October. I had way more fun with Venom, Let There Be Carnage than Venom. Now, from a plot perspective, I still don't think Venom, Let There Be Carnage is a great plot, especially when you think of Carnage. I think Cletus Cassidy getting the Carnage character makes sense, but there's no dynamic between Cletus and Carnage, which is why Eddie and Venom work, because they have a great back and forth. Cletus and Carnage really do not. I was kind of disappointed how Naomi Harris was kind of wasted in her role being Shriek. She's kind of just Cletus's love interest. The only reason why she's in the movie is that her powers, the sonic boom, can kind of take the symbiotes off our main 2 characters. Just a disappointing character. But the reason why this movie is so much better is that we don't have to set up and take time for Eddie to meet Venom and then to talk to each other. They are together bantering the entire 90-minute runtime, which is really crazy for this movie. But Venom and Eddie have so much funny banter. They have a great fight scene. There's a little fun bit where Venom strands and trying to go on to different people, but they realize that they miss each other. Because they're just really funny. And again, the action scenes are shot much, much better, especially the Carnage breakout scene is a really cool one. But it is feeling like we are kind of getting a bit tired of Venom just fighting Venom-like people in the third act of these movies. Hopefully in Venom 3, it's a new type of villain who Venom has to go up against. But I still did prefer this a lot more than the first film. Let's move into now. Let's talk about some really good to great Spider-Man films. With number 6, this is where obviously it's up to interpretation, your opinion. Number 6 for me is Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, this is a film that I loved the first 2 times I saw it in theaters, and for me has really decreased each time I watched it. I've seen this film like 7 to 10. I've seen this film a lot. It does decrease for me each time I watch it. It's not a bad movie or anything. I think it's a really great Spider-Man film, but I do find more issues with it throughout when I keep rewatching the film. Tom Holland's really great. Jake Gyllenhaal eats up the screen time as Mysterio. That's one of my favorite parts of the film, is that, Mysterio doesn't turn on Peter until like an hour into the movie. You get really a split half and half movie with, Gyllenhaal being a good guy. And even though the twist is coming, the movie still sells you that he's a good person. And then once he turns, he actually does care about Peter Parker. He doesn't want to kill Peter Parker, but he has to for this whole thing to happen. I really love the dynamic between Gyllenhaal and Holland. I also think Zendaya does a significantly better job from a character point of view and a performance point of view as MJ in this film. She has much better chemistry with Holland. Happy might be my favorite scene in this film, with Happy on the plane telling Peter that, Tony second guessed everything, but he never second guessed you. And I thought realizing that was a big step in his evolution as a character. Obviously, the post-credit scenes obviously are huge. The post-credit scene of this film, the first one is the opening scene, setting up the opening scene of No Way Home. And then learning that Talos was Nick Fury was a big move. But I do have a couple problems. There's a couple scenes that just really take me out of the film. One plot line that does is really Ned. I love Ned, especially in No Way Home and Homecoming. But in this film, it feels like they had nothing for Ned to do. So they kind of just had Ned do this love thing with Betty that for me just wasn't really, it was funny at first. And then it really starts to not be funny throughout the entire film because they say like babe every other word. It gets really annoying. The scene where Peter puts the target using Edith puts it on Brad and almost kills Brad and says, everyone here, look, there's goats on the left. And then he just jumps out of the truck. There's a lot of scenes that just really just pull me out of the film because it does for the most part work well, but the one big plot line, some scenes that just absolutely pull me out of the film do keep this from being a top 5 Spider-Man film. To number 5, this is where the controversial stuff will start. Number 5 for me is Spider-Man. Let me find it. Spider-Man 2. Now, I know a lot of people believe that this is your favorite Spider-Man film of all time, or even your favorite comic book film of all time. I love Spider-Man 2. And this is just showing how much I love this franchise, that Spider-Man 2 is at number 5. Alfred Molina is fantastic as Doc Ock. Obviously, the train sequence that you can see behind me is one of the most iconic comic book scenes of all time in a comic book movie. It's a really, really excellent scene. The MJ and Peter stuff, and the reason why I love this film so much is how much Peter gets basically destroyed as Peter Parker, even more than Spider-Man. That's why he loses his powers, is because, well, now Harry's pissed off with Peter because Peter has been taking pictures of Spider-Man. Harry's pissed off because Spider-Man is the one who he thinks killed his father. Then MJ is now dating, about to marry, J. Jonah's son. He's not paying his rent. Aunt May, he's kind of destroyed because he told Aunt May that he kind of left Uncle Ben behind, and he was one of the main reasons why Uncle Ben died. There's so much that goes wrong for him, which is why it's one of the most, that's why it's one of my favorite Spider-Man films, is because of how Peter's just getting destroyed by all parts of his life in the film, which then leads to him being destroyed by, Doc Ock. And then obviously Doc Ock and him have really great banter before he turns into Doc Ock. But some of the action scenes are just so good with Doc Ock. My one issue I do have with the film, though, is that I've never been in love with the whole thing of Peter because of everything in his life causing him to actually lose his powers. I get the actual symbolism of it, but for me, it just never works as well as most people does. It's the one subplot for me that doesn't make this a top 4 or makes it the best Spider-Man film for me. It's a plot line that's in the movie for like the second act that doesn't really come all the way together for me. But overall, I do love Spider-Man 2. To number 4, let's start with Spider-Man Homecoming. I really, at the time before No Way Home, this is my favorite Tom Holland Spider-Man film. I love Spider-Man Homecoming. Vulture, Michael Keaton, my favorite actor, delivers, in my opinion, the second. He's definitely one of the best Spider-Man villains to date. It's a great high school film. It's what it really is. A high school film with not as big as stakes as the MCU usually offers. The world's not going to blow up. The villain Vulture just wants to get Tony Stark-like materials just for the support of his family. He's not trying to blow up the world or anything like that. And Peter and Iron Man also. Iron Man's not in the movie too much, where it doesn't feel like a Peter Parker film. Iron Man's in the film just enough to give a little mentorship to Peter. Peter and Ned have some great stuff. This was the one part I didn't like about the movie, is that I think MJ Zendaya is not doing a great job in this film. Not her fault. The character is written to be way too cool for school. And at the end of the film, when you watch it for the first time, before you see any of the rest of the films, when she's like, I'm MJ, at the first time I was like, I don't know about that. This is going to work. Obviously, it's really paid off, especially if you watch No Way Home. That's one part of the movie that just always pulls me out. MJ's jokes just really don't work for me in the film. But really, it's a really, really great, subtle Spider-Man film. It's really cool. Again, a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man film where Peter's just in New York trying to figure out what to do. And obviously the Vulture twist is something that you just don't think about when you watch the movie for the first time when it happens. It's definitely one of the more shocking twists that the MCU or really any Spider-Man movies ever had before. And then the car scene is so intense and so well acted by both Keaton and Holland. So I really do love this film as well. Number 3, let's go into we're going to move into Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is number 3 for me. So I don't have it pulled up. I'm about to pull it up right now. So Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse for me is number 3. Now, again, I believe my number 2, I think I like more than Spider-Verse. I do think this is probably a better film than Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. But there's still no denying how much I generally love Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. It's definitely one of the most special films I've ever seen in the theater in my entire life. It was a very special theater experience for me, with the fact that I saw it 2 weeks early at an advanced screening for, Fandango used to do advanced screenings. And I saw that film and I had no expectations coming into it. But it turned out that I actually just generally really, really loved the movie. It was a complete shock in the theater, the fact that how great the movie was. It's a really, really great film. It's just a really great film. And being in that theater, in a sold out theater, when no one expected it to be this special, it's a very special movie to me. The fact that they really nailed the Spider-Verse in animated form, and Miles Morales, the character, being so well done, really, really makes this movie really special, in my opinion. All the characters are great. Nick Cage, the Spider-Man Noir, is really hilarious, but Jake Johnson's perfect casting. Haley Steinfeld, the animation and the cleverness of making this feel like a comic book come to life. It's a truly once-in-a-lifetime animated film that really gave the hope that Spider-Man No Way Home is a possibility. Really, maybe gave everyone like, we can do this probably live action because of how great this movie is. Can't wait for the 2 sequels. Lord and Miller are geniuses. And Miles is just a genuine kid who just wants to do the right thing. And he finally stepped up to the plate. I love this movie. The music, the Prowler music is really, really great. And the Peter and his family relationship, it's not like it's Uncle Ben. Uncle Aaron and his dad have a very odd relationship. They don't really see each other, but he really loves Uncle Aaron. All these different relationships, I think, are really, really well thought out. And it's a very emotional thread. The only issue for me with this film is really Kingpin. You kind of get one scene where he flashed back to his wife and his son leaving his house after him punching Spider-Man, and they get killed on the way out. It's a really forgettable plot line for a villain. Kingpin, I think Olivia Octavius is way more interesting in this film as a villain than Kingpin, but they made Kingpin the overarching villain. So I wish the movie had a stronger villain. But overall, I really do enjoy Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, one of my favorite animated films of all time. At number 2 for me is Spider-Man 2002, the one that kicked off really the superhero genre in the modern superhero genre, before Nolan's Batman films and before the MCU. This is the film that I have grown up watching the most. Of course, it came out the year I was born. I've watched this film my entire life, and it never gets old for me. Now, yes, I think Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse might be a better overall film, but I just have way more fun watching this film than I do not a lot more, but I love this film to death. I have so much nostalgia. I was quoting a lot of the movie when I was rewatching it for this video. Tobey Maguire is playing such a nerd and such well done. Now, is he old enough? Probably not, but he's not the right age, but he is playing a nerd really, really perfectly. The way he interacts with MJ, the awkwardness. And you also buy, at the same time, it's a Spider-Man origin story, which is my favorite origin story of all time in movies. It's also matched by an excellent origin story for Green Goblin, who Willem Dafoe is by far the best Spider-Man villain to date. And he is so fantastic in this film. And what they absolutely nail in Spider-Man 2002 is the fact that Norman really favors Peter over his own son, Harry, and how that really impacts the entire film. Harry, Norman, when he goes to an apartment, always wants to talk to Peter about science stuff and doesn't really want to talk to Harry. And this then leads to, Norman going crazy. Peter becoming Spider-Man, really heartbreaking stuff with Uncle Ben. I think the swinging, I can't believe how much of this film actually works out. Again, it's a very quotable movie. That's some really, again, it's really cheesy, but for me, the cheese really, really works. And it leads to a non-CGI, brutal action scene in the third act, which I believe really stands this out from any other Spider-Man films that the third act is a brutal hand-to-hand combat fight with no CGI really between Spider-Man and Goblin in the bricks in that building at the end of the movie. It's a really physical, brutal fight that is definitely the most brutal fight out of any Spider-Man film, which then leads to Norman dying by his own blade and Harry realizing that Spider-Man is the one who killed him. And Peter chooses not to be with MJ in this film because he doesn't want to put his family in danger. I really love this movie. My favorite origin story in any movie ever. It's my favorite origin story ever. And it's done so well in this movie. But coming in first place, can't believe it. It's Spider-Man No Way Home, number one. This is definitely my favorite Spider-Man film of all time because it nails, as I said, I'm going into spoilers, the fact that they brought back all of these villains together and did such a great job bringing all these villains back, but also bringing in the three Spider-Men together and nailing that dynamic. They weren't just there for the villains, and the other two Spider-Men are not just here to be cameos. They're actually here to be supporting characters in the film. It's definitely, in my opinion, the most emotional Spider-Man film when you talk about Aunt May's death, and then just the fantastic acting from Tom Holland. From start to finish. It's a really well-acted film by him. Just enough of Doctor Strange. Willem Dafoe doing a better job and possibly more menacing in this film than he was back in 2002. All the villains getting really much an upgrade other than Lizard. But Ned and Zendaya getting also their best performances, Jacob Batalon and Zendaya giving their best performances in the franchise. You really buy the Peter and MJ relationship, the really somber goodbye from Peter to MJ at the end of the film just really, really works. It's a very emotional film. I was really enwrapped. It's 2.5 hours. It absolutely flies by. Yes, the spell happens in a very cliche kind of whatever way, but we get to the actual exciting part. And that's seeing the three Spider-Men go against these villains and have fun banter. Yes, it's fan service, but it really does fit the actual story of the movie. And Peter, this is really Tom Holland's origin story. He learns the great power comes with great responsibility line from his Uncle Ben, who was Aunt May in his franchise, and then learning that from the two other Spider-Men who've gone through similar things like him, which then leads him through the selfless act that everyone forgets who Peter Parker is at the end of the film. So I absolutely love this film so much. So that's my ranking of all 11 Spider-Man films. So please let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Like the video, subscribe. I'll see you guys soon.